Hello, my name is Eric Yurkovich and I'm Associate Principal at Ramey & Associates. As part of the South San Francisco General Plan update process, we're going to be doing a series of community workshops on land use alternatives in the city. Today, I'm going to give a brief primer video on what are land use alternatives. The purpose of land use alternatives are really to test different land use and urban design patterns within the city. We've created a series of different land use alternatives to really understand the trade-offs between different big policy questions. Where do we place residential in the future? What are the different types of commercial uses we'd like to see, and in what locations in the future of the city? These alternatives really help us to make informed choices about the future. And once we've kind of established the preferred direction and alternative for the future, we can start to think about what are the specific policies and implementation mechanisms needed to make those alternatives happen. The land use alternatives are really composed of three key components: the pattern of land use, the mix of those land uses, and the intensity of those land uses, or the density of those land uses. We mix those three things together and we can get a series of outcomes to help evaluate those alternatives. Some of those outcomes include the balance of jobs and housing within the city, the vehicle miles traveled, and the greenhouse gas emissions from each of those alternatives. This piece of information will help us make those informed choices about the future. Underlying each of those alternatives is a series of building blocks. These building blocks illustrate different types of residential, commercial, and public and institutional uses across the city. This shows a selection of those different place types or building blocks, showing mixed use types, non-residential business and technology parks, and residential types such as medium intensity residential. Most of these types are already found within South San Francisco, whether they're in downtown, east of 101, Lindenville, or in any of the residential neighborhoods. In some cases, we've included other new building blocks that don't exist in the city, like mixed industrial high, so that we can really test these different policy choices and alternatives in the future. Underlying all of these alternatives and all of the place types is really this thinking about how we can create great places. How can we create great places for people to gather in the city? How can we create safe streets that allow people to get around easily and access those places to gather and those shops to go to? And how can we create lots of different opportunities for housing choice within the city? And we'll be thinking as we go through this process about at the neighborhood scale how we create these great places, but how each of these neighborhoods then knit to create one great place as a city. Some of the big ideas that we're going to be testing in the South San Francisco General Plan update alternatives are shown on the screen now. These include maintaining the city as an economic engine for the region, producing workforce and affordable housing, reinforcing the downtown as the heart of the community, creating a mixed-use transit-oriented community near the Caltrain station that's well connected into downtown, improving multimodal mobility across the city, addressing sea level rise in the future, and then transforming Colma Creek into a place for nature, access, open space, and flood protection. We've taken all these big ideas and we present them, as I said, in the series of maps in these land use alternatives. This illustration shows the three land use alternatives as compared to the current general plan. Each of these shows that distribution of land uses, that mix, and those intensity of those place types distributed across the city. Those have a series of outcomes which we'll show in those community workshops, including housing units, jobs, and jobs housing balance, among others. Once we go through that community process and get feedback on those different land use alternatives, we'll come together and move forward one preferred land use map for the city. This will be happening in the summer and fall of 2020. Once that general plan land use map is established, we'll then go and create the more detailed zoning designations as part of this process, which will happen in winter and spring of 2021. During that process, we'll be looking in more detail at things like the allowable uses, the building heights and setbacks, bulk and density, requirements for open space and parking, and transitions between different properties. So that zoning will be the opportunity to talk in more detail about urban design standards and guidelines. We encourage you to go to shapessf.net for more information about the project, to join our mailing list, and to learn more about upcoming meetings on the general plan update process. Thank you very much.